So we've seen why it's important to breathe through the nostrils, and we've seen that breathing through the nostrils actually involves other parts of the body. But breathing in general involves the whole body, and I want to say a little bit about that now. Before we do, I want to say why we breathe, just to put the active part of breathing into context. The reason why we breathe is not to get air into the lungs. We take air into the lungs in order to bring oxygen to cells throughout our body. So breathing has two parts. The external part, where we take air from the environment into the lungs and take oxygen out of the air so it's transported by the blood to the cells. And then the deeper or internal respiration part of it, where the cells receive the oxygen that they need and also get rid of waste products, which we then breathe out. How do we breathe? We breathe by making the space inside the chest cavity larger and then smaller rhythmically. When the space gets larger, air flows in through the nose or through the mouth. When the space gets smaller, air flows out. We make the space, we change the size of the space two ways. First, the ribs, which wrap around the body, of course, move kind of like pail handles, which increases the circumference of the entire rib cage. And when that happens, it gets bigger and air flows in. The diaphragm is the second part of breathing. The diaphragm kind of bisects the body like this, but it's dome-shaped so that when it contracts, it descends or flattens out. That makes the space larger this way. When the ribs rise like pail handles and the space gets bigger this way, the diaphragm goes down. When the diaphragm rebounds to its dome position and the ribs come back down, the air flows out. Air comes in, air flows out. And that rhythmic or tidal, that's the tidal flow of air that we call breathing. One more thing about the diaphragm. We sometimes think of it as being down here. It's not. The diaphragm is a kind of a partition between the lungs and heart, which are above it, and all the abdominal contents below. And in that sense, it's really not even remotely where we think it is. It's up here, and it's a key component of the process of breathing. But it's not the only important part of the process. Sometimes it's considered, as people will refer to it as the primary muscle of breathing, and the ribs are sometimes spoken of as being secondary or accessory. Well, the ribs are every bit as important, especially when you consider that all the ribs down here are moving quite a lot, and there are muscles between the ribs, so there's really an extensive system above the diaphragm that's involved in breathing. So really, the ribs and the intercostal muscles, along with the diaphragm, are the main agents of breathing. Okay, but that brings us to the question of how we breathe naturally. Anything we do to interfere with our musculoskeletal system will tend to interfere with breathing. If, for instance, you are tightening your arms or lifting weight, you're going to tend to become breathless or tense and hold your breath. The same is true if you tighten your buttocks. You'll notice that you'll tend to hold the breath, or if you tighten your legs. Breathing depends on the free, flexible working of the musculoskeletal system, which is why the real key to breathing is the proper working of that entire system. We're going to look at that in more detail later when we look at that whole system, but I just wanted to put nostril breathing in context, because when we're breathing through our nostrils, all this other activity is going on. Okay, let's come back for a moment to nostril breathing. Sitting in the chair as I am here, if you notice the air going in and out through your nostrils, we've seen that we feel that because we have sensory feedback from the face and nostrils and that whole region. If you notice the air going in and out through your nostrils, that's the tidal flow of air. It means that your ribs are moving, your diaphragm is descending and ascending, and breathing is left alone. We can practice methods, but the single most important thing that really we need to think about with breathing is how is the body designed naturally such that we don't interfere with breathing? And the first step is to leave breathing alone and not to manipulate it. We can help that process along also if for a moment we focus not on getting air in, because we're often obsessing about getting more air in, or we hold our breath because of tension, and focus instead on letting it come in on its own, which it will do through the nostrils, and then blowing it out slowly through the lips like this. Let it come in again, or you could let it come in a few times, and then blow it out. That extended exhalation is allowing the air time to come in on its own quickly and extending the time that the air goes out, which will help to leave the breathing alone, helps to get rid of waste products. When we breathe out, we're getting rid of waste products, and is a good way to focus not on getting air in, but on stopping the interference so that we're letting the air out and focusing instead on that.